What's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, a clothing company, but also, and really what we do is address the human body's natural function. We come at it through the skeletal system. The only thing that doesn't change out of the things that we talk about structurally, the fat content that people focus on will change at different times in their lives, and so will the amount of muscle mass that people have. But really the body is about its natural foundational position. It's about keeping everything within the body in its only neutral position, because each joint has two directions that it can go, and there's a neutral. So I'm going to address the noise. We're out here raw, real, in the Image Clothing Company, no special mic, and so it might be kind of noisy, but that's how we are, authentic, just speaking things as they are. And our key word is always allowing the body to work. It will only ever do what it was designed to do. Designed in the image of our living God, Jesus Christ. We have three sides to us. This side here, that's what we do. I discuss the anatomy of the human body in depth, and we talk about clothing because it's the only thing placed onto our bodies. And unless the body was otherwise restricted by anything, it would just work. There'd be no reason for it to not unless there was one. And we all wear clothing. If clothing's imbalanced at all, if it's stretchy, if it's got anything that's going to do any type of alteration to the body can't have a say against it. Because we live on an earth with gravity. And we have a sternum, behind it the spine, right here's the trachea, the nose, all in the center of the body, and the jaw stabilizes the entire body naturally. So we have to be over our center with our feet opposing that, gripping arches inward, always activated. We talk about shifting weight actually deactivates your body. You have to stay over your only center line to be working the way that the human body was designed to work, the only way that it actually does. So, yeah. Another third of us is In The Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. Check that out if you'd like to, where you find your podcasts in 2025. Today's actually the 4th of April. So yeah, going forth, we've got the internet, you'll find us. Over here, another third of us, we have In The Image Clothing Company music, where I show setups, sizings of guitars. We allow the hands to work while we play, because the hands are essentially the shoulders. As I say, the feet are essentially the hips. The body will only work activated as a whole, and if parts of it are being altered, there's other parts of it trying to compensate, and we just have pain and damage, scar tissue, chronic patternings being built up from things that we're just not even aware of, unless we are. So we discuss things as they are here. I said that already within this, but life-changing and eternal truths in the Image Clothing Company. So I'll talk about where clothing has to sit. As I do within the intros, there's no opinion. If you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're tall, if you're short, if you're skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, or any time period to ever be. Human bodies just have the functions they do because we're a mechanical machine. It's just hinging and pivoting, rotating. So in order for it to be in its only neutral working position, pants need to be entirely above the hips, so there's no alteration to the pelvis as a whole. Slightly higher in the front than the rear for the waistband, because these core muscles can only ever work shortened, which means contracted, and that's how they activate and then support the entire body. Just that's the reason they're there. Secondly, to pants, tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to be evenly behind the little bones at the peak of our shoulders on the tops, because those are the other end of our collarbones here. They come to the center, and that's how we keep our shoulders in their only neutral position, which is behind our head, where those upper trapezius muscles connect to the base of the rear of the skull, along the cervical spine, and then down to the top/rear of the shoulder back here. For the edges of our shoulder seams, they should be right at the very edges of the shoulders, where the functionality of the shoulder joint is. Oversized clothing is in itself an imbalance and extremely damaging to the body, because it will just have seams sitting in locations where the body doesn't operate, excess weight, you'll be reaching and you can't, and so things will be compensating, and the body will be damaged from the tips of the toes to the tips of the fingers to the tips of the head. If anything's altered anywhere within there, everything to the extremity of the other point is also altered. So 2 prerequisites we have under In The Image Clothing Company, separate from where clothing sits, because there's not always tags in clothing. There's not always laces in shoes. But when there is a lace, which is really just a rope weaved across the top of the human foot, there's only one way to do that that's actually shaped the way the human foot is. You introduce ropes to the body and it can potentially put it into just such a damaging position that it will just never work in. So In The Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique is that with that, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside to the center line of the human body on both feet. And there we go. The feet are unaltered with that being the case. Ideally no stretch within shoelaces and round. We get in depth with a lot of things. But yes, tags, anywhere they're placed within clothing, they have to be removed because they're either causing a physical gap, altering the skeletal system's only working position, and or in cases like tags within shoes at this time, they're often just heat shrunk on, so there's not a gap they're causing, but they don't allow musculature to activate. So then you've got the body just doing all that it can and it's actually just being damaged. So this video is actually titled Keeping Short Sleeves Short, because people will wear short sleeve shirts. I'm one of those people who does. I have one on underneath this button up. But if the sleeves that we have on what's intended to be a short sleeve shirt touch our forearms here, then it's like what I was showing a few minutes ago when I was talking about reaching and things not being in the only location where the functionality actually is, like the seam at the edge of the shoulder. Then you have compensation. If you have a short sleeve shirt and the sleeve actually comes down past where your elbow will hinge, now when your elbow hinges, it'll try to get out of the way of that sleeve and your upper trapezius here will just be elongated. And then now your body's not being supported up here, and so your feet are just collapse, and your whole body, like I was saying, right, through the entirety of it gets affected if any part of it is at all. So having short sleeves short enough to where you can bend your elbow entirely like this and it's not in the way. Because what'll happen is you'll go to bend your elbow all the way and that sleeve will hit your arm, and then now things like, yes, we mentioned the upper trapezius muscle, which is hugely important, but there's also a mid and a lower trapezius muscle on both sides of the spine that connect to the body, right? Like the shoulders out here. But there's also all these muscles in the rotator cuff, which is a group of muscles that go into this big bone back here we talk about often, the scapula, which really just affects the shoulder. The scapula is the shoulder in a sense. It determines where the shoulders sit and how they move. And if we have a sleeve that'll sit here and then pull the shoulder out of its only neutral position, now you have all those muscles that I just mentioned, plus all that do get affected, just being deactivated and not being allowed to work just because a sleeve is sitting here on the forearm and it's having to compensate for it. So I think a big thing with what we talk about so often is a lot of people might think that it's something not quite big enough to actually have the effect that we show that it does. Because if you think about a sleeve like that, the weight is very, very minimal, but it's sensory activation, and the body will be doing all that it can to avoid anything in its way of its just natural working. And so imagine just something here, like a tree limb sticking out, even if it's really small, and you're just kind of standing next to a tree, you go to bend your arm and it feels that, it's going to just try to move out of the way. Anything that it could be, used a tree limb because it's a natural thing, and the goal is natural under In The Image Clothing Company. But we don't realize it. The pectorals here, these muscles that just allow the shoulder to press like this, especially across the body, that's really the biggest things that those pecs do. They'll be so overactivated because you have this sleeve changing the shoulder, and now that shoulder coming forward like that actually is only shortening the distance of the pec, which means just chronically being stuck in a shorter position than it would ever actually even neutrally sit in, which would be here, just me standing. And so at this point, now your pectoral muscles will be entirely overactivated and chronically. Chronic just means like for an extended duration of time. So it really does come down to things like that. Just a short sleeve shirt that's just very slightly too long even, and sometimes it's very much too long. But if it's touching the forearm at all, your shoulder health will just be damaged. And it's unreal, the effect of all this stuff. I've talked about a little bit, especially on In The Image Clothing Company podcast, my experience with how much physical pain I've gone through getting my body to where it is now as the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, and getting out of these chronic patternings. I haven't done a single exercise, but breaking up all the scar tissue and getting the body to just be in its only neutral again, it's a lot to go through. Bone spurs and shortening of muscles, scar tissue just excessively builds up along muscles where they are next to the bone, and there's so much damage that happens to the body. So yeah, it's huge. We have to keep our sleeves, they're short, actually short. So there we go. I could talk about any and everything that it could and does affect, but as I say, if anything within the body isn't working correct, something else and many things are compensating. And if you have compensation, you're going to just have damage. And so anyway, you can notice though, as I said, you don't need to be shifting weight because it's actually just deactivating your body. I'm just speaking out of personal experience. I'm speaking out of the only way the human body actually works. Truly, I just know that it's kind of far-fetched, but you watch me stand when I'm making videos and I don't move. And I'm entirely like loose and relaxed. It's not like I'm stiff. There's just so many misconceptions, and I think you can tell, and I've said that within the past. Well, the last episode I filmed for In The Image Clothing Company podcast was titled Willingness, and my countenance was just so like almost heavy-hearted. It's as real as it gets. It's as obvious as it is once you see it. I have these phrases and we say them under In The Image Clothing Company because it's the thing causing pain and damage to people, their physical bodies, clothing. That is the actual one cause. Anything that could damage the body could, but in every human being's case, it's what it is. So anyway, thank you. That's what we're going to say in this about keeping sleeves off the forearms, because it's all that you need to know, as far as just you need to know what to do. And there we go. So we will have clothing available, being a clothing company. When we do, it's not available yet. Made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting correct, and that's how we allow the body to work. One thing actually that needs to be said within this, the dreaded collar seam, that little seam that's up in the collar of shirts, I've made a video titled Keeping Collars Centered, and what that does to the body. If you do have a collar seam in your shirt, and anything you place around your neck that we call a collar, it's almost always on the left side, almost. And what that'll do is just actually place that right sleeve lower because of just what it does, moving the collar off to the right side. just the excess material in the seam on the left raises that left shoulder, and really what that's doing is deactivating the right side of the body. We call it the dreaded collar seam under In The Image Clothing Company, regardless of what design it is, just any seam within a collar, because of how damaging it is to the entire body. So the side opposing where the seam is, that sleeve will be lower, and so the right side of the body is the side that's already so damaged and inhibited by clothing, because as I say, clothing patterns are right-handed. I made a video titled The Right-Handed World, and that's what I was discussing within there. So yeah, it's very big, huge to focus on. So the dreaded collar seam modification under In The Image Clothing Company, it's one of the biggest things we talk about within clothing. So yeah, everything's big though that we talk about, just because any restriction is restriction, and the extent of what that's really doing is something you feel, but you don't know where it's coming from if you don't know. So we talk about the truth of it here under In The Image Clothing Company. So stick around if you'd like, and check out the other two sides of the company. And yeah, I'm grateful. It's becoming more and more real. The more that my body is getting natural, the more that I'm understanding of things, the more that I can discuss and describe things deeper, and it just is what it is. So yeah, In The Image Clothing Company is going to be huge. I keep saying it because it's just the case, it's just the truth, it's because we speak truth. It will never change. So thank you.